Marshall slid another photo across the metal table. My pulse faltered as I looked down. It was Elizabeth! Her hair disheveled, her hospital gown torn, her eyes closed. For a moment, I thought she was dead. Then I noticed the faint rise of her chest. She was breathing. "She's alive," Marshall said, voice calm as stone. "For now. But that depends on you." I swallowed hard, my voice barely holding. "Where is she?" He ignored the question, sliding another photograph toward me. This time it was Grace, my baby, lying in a glass chamber filled with pale blue light. Wires trailed from her ankle. I saw the faint surgical dot glowing faintly under her skin, pulsing like a heartbeat. Marshall folded his hands. "She's under containment. We're not monsters, Mr. Tennille. We're scientists. That child is carrying the culmination of 15 years of research. Something far beyond your understanding." I stared at him, every muscle trembling. "You implanted something in her, without consent. That's not science. That's violation." He tilted his head slightly, studying me like a specimen. "Every generation believes it understands morality until the next proves it obsolete. We're not violating nature, Mr. Tennille. We're perfecting it." I spat on the table. "Perfecting? You turned my daughter into an experiment." His lips twitched into a smirk. "An experiment that could rewrite the genetic code of humanity. Project Genesis isn't about control. It's about evolution." He stood and pressed a button on the wall. A screen descended from the ceiling, flickering to life. Lines of code, DNA sequences, and holographic diagrams filled the air. In the center was a rotating 3D model of an infant's genome. "Your daughter's DNA," he said quietly. "Self-healing, adaptive, immune to over 2,000 known diseases. Do you understand what that means?" I shook my head, whispering, "It means you played God." Marshall sighed, almost pitying. "We didn't create her. We completed her. You think A. Thompson was your friend, your benefactor, your savior. He wasn't. He was one of us. He just forgot his place." At that moment, I realized something deeper. "You killed him, didn't you?" Marshall paused, then smiled faintly. "That would be merciful." "No, we didn't kill him. He killed himself long before we found him. The man you saw on that CCTV? That wasn't A. Thompson." The room tilted. "What are you saying?" "The man you saw was one of the prototypes, a synthetic. A genetic mimic with AIDS appearance and memories. We built them for redundancy. When one goes rogue, another takes his place. The real A died 2 years ago in an explosion at the Lagos lab." My chest tightened. "That's not possible." He called me. Marshall's voice softened. "You heard an echo, Mr. Tennille. A ghost of code." I gritted my teeth. "Then what do you want from me?" He leaned in closer. "The encryption key. Nora didn't tell you everything. The microchip in Grace's ankle contains only half the data. The other half was embedded in her father's DNA. Yours." My blood froze. "Mine." "Yes," he said. "You were part of Project Genesis before you ever met Elizabeth. Your blood holds the genetic cipher that unlocks the full sequence." My thoughts spun out of control. I had never donated blood, never joined any trial. How could they? He saw my confusion. "You don't remember, do you? You worked at Metasol Labs in Lagos 6 years ago. Routine blood screening for staff. You signed a consent form buried in your employment packet. That's how we got it. Aid saw your file and chose you for Elizabeth's donor program." My stomach turned. "You mean Grace isn't—" "Not entirely yours," Marshall interrupted. "Not entirely hers. She's ours." I lunged forward, but the restraints held. The chair clanged against the floor. "You're insane." He didn't flinch. "You can hate us later. Right now, we need your cooperation. You'll give us a blood sample, we'll reunite you with your family, and we'll pretend this never happened." I stared at him, trembling with rage. "And if I refuse?" He smiled thinly. "Then we harvest it without consent." He stood, signaling 2 guards. They entered with medical trays. One prepared a syringe, the other unfastened my sleeve. I struggled, shouting, "Where's my daughter?" Marshall watched quietly as the needle pricked my arm. My vision blurred. The world tilted sideways. Then darkness swallowed everything. I woke up in a moving vehicle. My hands were free this time, but my head throbbed. The sound of tires on wet pavement filled my ears. Through the tinted window, I saw Toronto's skyline retreating behind us. We were heading north. Snowflakes streaked past the glass like stars. Across from me sat Say, his face pale, eyes wide. "Bro," he whispered, "you're awake." My voice was rough. "Where are we?" "I don't know. They knocked me out too. I woke up an hour ago. They said we're going to Facility 9. Elizabeth!" He hesitated. "They took her somewhere else. Said she's being processed." The word processed made my stomach twist. "Grace!" I croaked. "She's with them. They said she's stable." The van slowed. We turned onto a narrow, icy road lined with pine trees. Ahead, a large compound loomed. Steel gates, floodlights, motion sensors. The kind of place that didn't exist on any map. The guards escorted us through a biometric checkpoint. One scanned my eye, another pressed something cold against my neck. I felt a sting, then a beep. DNA verified. A voice said over the intercom. Inside, everything gleamed. White corridors, glass walls, people in sterile coats moving like ghosts. The air smelled of ozone and bleach. A woman in her 50s approached, her hair tied back neatly, eyes sharp. Her name badge read Dr. Evelyn Marsh. "Welcome, Mr. Adewale," she said smoothly. "You've caused quite the stir." "Where's my daughter?" I demanded. "She's safe. And soon, thanks to you, she'll be even safer." She gestured to follow. "Come." We walked through a corridor lined with observation windows. Behind the glass, I saw infants in incubators, each with a small glowing tag near their ankles. My stomach dropped. There weren't just a few, there were dozens. Project Genesis wasn't just one child, Dr. Marsh said softly. It was a generation. "Monsters," Say muttered. She turned to him, smiling faintly. "History will call us something else." We entered a lab filled with medical machinery. A glass chamber stood in the center, filled with blue vapor. Inside was Grace. Her tiny body floated peacefully, sensors attached to her wrists and ankles. The sight nearly broke me. I pressed my hands against the glass. "Grace! Baby, it's Daddy." Dr. Marsh touched a control panel. "She's sedated. Her vitals are strong. But we need your blood to complete the genetic decryption. Once that's done, she'll be free." "You're lying," I said. "You'll never let her go." Marsh smiled coldly. "You underestimate our need for results. Once we have what we need, you're all disposable." Something in me snapped. "Then you'll never get it." She tilted her head. "Oh, I think we will." Behind me, Say moved. I caught the flick of his hand. Something small, metallic, clutched between his fingers. One of the guards noticed too late. A blinding flash erupted. The lab filled with smoke. "Go!" Say shouted. I lunged for the console, smashing it with my elbow. Alarms blared. Glass cracked. I hit the emergency release. The chamber hissed open, vapor pouring out. Grace fell gently into my arms, warm, breathing, alive. Dr. Marsh screamed. "Stop them!" We ran. Bullets tore through the fog behind us. One grazed my shoulder, but I kept moving. Say grabbed a fallen guard's access card and swiped the nearest door. It opened into a service tunnel. "Go!" he shouted. "I'll hold them off." "No!" I yelled, grabbing his arm. He smiled through the smoke. "You have a kid, bro. You run. Don't stop." Before I could argue, he shoved me through the door and slammed it shut. I heard the lock engage, followed by gunfire. My heart shattered as I ran. Grace clutched against my chest, tears streaming down my face. By the time I burst out into the cold night, the compound behind me was in chaos. Alarms wailed. Smoke rose from the rooftop. I stumbled into the forest, snow crunching beneath my boots. Grace whimpered softly, her tiny fingers grasping at my collar. I whispered, "I've got you, baby. I've got you." Ahead, headlights appeared through the trees. A car stopped. The door opened. Elizabeth. Her face was pale, her hair tangled, but her eyes lit up when she saw Grace. "Oh my God, you found her!" I ran to her, breath ragged. "How did you?" "No time," she said. "Get in." We drove into the night, tires spinning on the frozen road. Behind us, the facility lights faded into the dark. For a few minutes, we didn't speak. Only the sound of the engine and the baby's breathing filled the car. Then Elizabeth glanced at me. Say! I shook my head slowly. He didn't make it. She looked away, tears streaming silently. I held Grace close. They said the chip in her leg, it's not just a tracker. It's a key. They need my blood to unlock it. Elizabeth's knuckles tightened on the steering wheel. Then we can't go to any hospital, any embassy. They're everywhere. Where are we going? I asked. She hesitated. Somewhere no one will find us. Abe told me once, before everything, that if things went wrong, there was a place in the north. A safe house built during the early Genesis trials. Off-grid. How far? 3 hours if we keep moving. Snow thickened, swirling around the car like ghosts. I looked at Grace sleeping in her mother's arms and wondered what kind of world she'd grow up in. A world that wanted to own her. But beneath the fear, a new thought took root. If her DNA truly held the key to something so powerful, maybe it wasn't just a curse. Maybe it was a weapon. We drove in silence until dawn began to break through the clouds. Then, just as the sun touched the horizon, my phone buzzed. The screen flickered. An unknown number. Elizabeth's eyes met mine. Don't. But I answered anyway. A familiar voice spoke, calm, steady. Tiniola, you escaped. Good. You'll need to keep running. But this time, you're not the prey. I froze. Eh? The voice chuckled. Call me what's left of him. The code they tried to bury. You have what they want, but I have what they fear. What do you mean? Project Genesis wasn't about evolution, he said. It was about control. And your daughter's the only one who can rewrite it. The line clicked dead. Elizabeth's hands trembled. Was that? I nodded slowly. He's alive. Or something like it. The forest road stretched ahead, endless and white. Somewhere beyond it, the truth waited. Cold, buried and dangerous. I looked down at Grace's ankle, at the faint pulse of light beneath her skin. And I knew that whatever lay ahead, we weren't just running anymore. We were fighting back. The snow had thickened by the time we reached the old road that led toward Hollow Creek. The world felt muffled, like sound itself was afraid to move. Grace leaned against me, limping slightly, her breath visible in quick bursts. The faint light in her ankle still glowed through the fabric of her jeans, pulsing like a heartbeat. We can't keep going like this, Elizabeth said from behind us. Her voice was sharp, trembling with fatigue. We need shelter. I scanned the tree line until I saw it, a shape through the curtain of snow. A roof. Faint smoke. A house where no house should have been. There, I said. Grace followed my gaze and frowned. You think someone lives out here? I don't care, I answered. We're out of time. The closer we got, the worse the feeling in my chest became. The air around the house was heavy, too still, like the snow refused to land on the roof. The front door stood half open, groaning softly in the wind. Elizabeth hesitated on the porch. This place looks wrong. It's shelter, I said. That's all that matters. But even as I said it, I knew I was lying. Inside, the air smelled of wood smoke and something metallic, blood, faint but old. A single lantern burned on a table beside the fireplace, casting long, restless shadows across the walls. The furniture was draped with sheets, untouched for years. Grace limped to the couch, collapsing with a sigh. It's warm, she whispered. Elizabeth found a blanket and wrapped it around her, but her eyes kept darting to the corners of the room. Who lights a lantern in an empty house? I walked to the window. Outside, the snow kept falling, but there were tracks in the yard, bare feet, leading away from the door into the forest. And then I saw it, a figure at the edge of the trees. Still, watching. Before I could speak, Grace gasped. It's him! I turned, and the light beneath her skin flared, bright enough to throw shadows across the ceiling. The room darkened as the lantern flickered low, its flame stretching and twisting against the cracked glass. The faint hum in Grace's ankle grew louder, steady as a heartbeat. The sound, filling the silence between us. Elizabeth stood near the doorway, clutching a rusted poker, her knuckles, white, her eyes wide with fear. I moved closer to the window, but the figure was gone. The snow outside looked untouched, no prints, no shadow, nothing, just the forest breathing in slow rhythm with the storm. I leaned closer and caught my reflection in the glass, but it wasn't mine, not exactly. My eyes were darker. Something moved just behind me. Grace winced, her hand gripping the edge of the couch. The glow beneath her skin spread, slowly tracing up her leg. Like veins of light, her breathing changed, shallow, quick, almost mechanical. She whispered something too soft to catch. I knelt beside her. "What is it?" I said, but she didn't answer, her gaze fixed on the fireplace where the flames bent as if drawn toward her. A faint whisper filled the room, a woman's voice, soft, calm, and horribly close. Elizabeth froze. "Did you hear that?" The whisper came again, clearer this time, but not from any direction. It was inside our heads, a voice woven through the sound of the fire. "He's coming back." Grace let out a small cry, and the lantern went out, plunging the room into darkness. The only light now came from her skin, the glow pulsing in rhythm with the voice that kept whispering words we couldn't understand. The house began to creak, each sound sharp like footsteps in the ceiling above. Elizabeth raised the poker toward the stairs, but I stopped her. "Listen." There it was again, heavier this time, boots on wood, slow, deliberate, one step, then another, until they stopped right above us. Grace's glow dimmed and she whispered, "He's here." The ceiling groaned and flakes of dust fell in thin streams. The air turned icy. I felt the weight of someone standing just beyond sight, a presence that pressed against the walls and the air itself. Then a faint sound came from the window behind me, like a hand brushing the glass. I turned slowly and saw a face outside, pale eyes wide and lifeless, staring in through the frost, the same face I had seen in the woods. Elizabeth screamed and swung the poker, but it hit only air. The window shattered inward, and the wind howled through the room, extinguishing everything, even Grace's light. For a few seconds there was nothing, no sound, no movement, just blackness. Then something cold touched my shoulder. I turned and saw him standing in the middle of the room, tall, thin, his face gray and torn, his mouth moving without sound. The same voice, still whispering in my head, "You left me." Grace collapsed, the light fading completely. Elizabeth grabbed her arm, dragging her toward the door. I stumbled after them as the man took a step forward, his bare feet leaving dark marks on the floor. We ran out into the storm, the snow cutting like glass. Behind us the house glowed faintly for a moment, then went dark, the whispers following us through the trees. We didn't stop until the road disappeared beneath the drifts, the night swallowing everything except the echo of that voice that would not die. And somewhere far behind us the lantern in the old house flared to life again. The storm did not end, it only changed. The snow became mist, the mist turned to thin threads of rain that clung to our faces and closed. The road beneath our feet had vanished completely. The forest seemed endless, each tree a black figure leaning closer than before. Grace barely stood. She leaned against Elizabeth, her breath shallow, her skin pale. The faint light that once pulsed beneath her ankle, now nothing but a fading bruise. We kept walking, guided only by instinct or desperation, the silence between us heavy and full of ghosts. After what felt like hours, we came to a clearing where the mist hung low over a frozen pond. The surface cracked like broken glass. The air smelled of metal and ash. I stopped because something about that place felt wrong, familiar in the worst way. Elizabeth whispered, "We've been here before." I wanted to deny it, but she was right. The broken fence on the far side, the bent birch tree near the water, it was the same clearing we passed the night before, except now the footprints leading out of it were ours, looping back as if we had walked in a circle again and again. Grace shivered, her lips trembling. "He's not letting us leave." The words sank into the air like stones. There was no echo, only the low hum of wind circling through the trees. I knelt by the water, the cracks in the ice glowed faintly, the same dull light that once burned inside Grace. I reached out and touched it, and felt warmth beneath the ice, like something alive pressing upward. Elizabeth pulled me back. "Don't touch it," she said, her voice breaking, but it was too late. The ice pulsed once hard enough to send a ripple through the whole pond, and then a voice rose from the water, the same whisper that haunted the house, only clearer now. "You brought her back." The sound crawled through the forest, the mist thickened, twisting into shapes that almost looked human, faces half-formed, moving in the gray light. Grace fell to her knees, the bruise on her ankle flaring with light again. She screamed, not from pain but from memory, her voice shaking the trees. She whispered, "He's in me. I can feel him moving inside my blood." Elizabeth tried to hold her, but the glow spread up her leg, her arms, her neck, until her eyes blazed like fire. She stood trembling, the light flickering in waves, and for a moment the mist stopped moving as if waiting. Then Grace spoke in two voices, hers and his overlapping each other. "You should have stayed dead." The ground cracked beneath her, the ice shattered completely, and the light from within her body burst outward, flooding the clearing with white. The air turned hot, the trees bent backward, the mist burned away, leaving only ash and snow. When it cleared, Grace was gone, no body, no trace, only the pond still glowing faintly, as if something beneath the surface had finally awakened. Elizabeth fell silent. She looked at me, her eyes hollow. What do we do now? I didn't answer. I couldn't. The whisper had returned softer, closer, speaking from inside my head. She's with him now. I stood staring at the pond as the glow faded to black, the silence of the forest swallowing everything again. But then the water moved, just once, a small ripple spreading outward, and at its center something rose, a pale hand reaching for the surface, fingers long and thin, nails torn and bleeding, the same mark on the wrist that Grace had, the same light trying to return. Elizabeth stepped back, shaking her head. We have to leave. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The hand broke through the ice completely, and then a face followed, pale eyes open, mouth frozen in a silent scream. It wasn't Grace. It was mine. The reflection twisted the mouth, moving though I couldn't feel it. The whisper grew into a voice, clear as glass. You can't run from yourself. The surface shattered, the reflection vanished, and the forest went dark again. Elizabeth grabbed my arm, pulling me away. We ran without direction through the woods until the first hint of dawn bled through the clouds, and even then the whisper followed us, quieter now, but still there, breathing between our footsteps. The forest thinned, and far ahead through the fog I saw a light, faint, warm, familiar. It looked like a cabin, maybe a town, maybe salvation, but deep inside I knew better, because behind us the same light flickered once inside the trees, answering it like a heartbeat, echoing closer with every step. We kept walking because stopping meant listening, and listening meant remembering, and remembering meant he would find us again. And somewhere behind the mist, the house on Hollow Creek waited, its door still open, its lantern still burning a soft glow against the dark. By morning the forest had turned gray, the light thin and cold, like the sky had forgotten how to rise. The snow no longer fell, but the ground still whispered with every step, the sound of leaves cracking underfoot. The fog clung low, wrapping itself around the trees and curling between our legs. Elizabeth walked ahead, her shoulders stiff, her breath short. She had not spoken since the pond. I followed behind her, my mind heavy with the image of the reflection, my reflection, the way it looked back at me like something that remembered me before I was born. Grace's name hung in my throat, but I didn't say it. It hurt to say it. The silence was safer. We came to a narrow trail that split through the woods. A crooked wooden sign leaned against a stump, the letters carved deep, though worn by rain. It read Hollow Creek, Mile 0. Elizabeth stopped, her voice. Then we left that place behind. How are we back? I didn't answer because I could see it now through the fog, the outline of the same old house roof, sagging door open, smoke rising faintly from the chimney. Though no one was inside, we hadn't left at all. We'd just been walking in circles like moths trapped in glass. Elizabeth turned toward me, her eyes wild. We can't go back there, we can't. But the ground trembled, a low rumble deep below, like something waking, and I knew we had no choice. The forest itself was pushing us back, the wind shifting the trees, groaning the sky, closing in until there was only one direction left, forward. We reached the porch, the boards groaned under our weight, the air smelled like burned cedar and old blood. I pushed the door open, and the house sighed a long, slow breath that came from the walls themselves. The lantern still burned on the table, flickering weakly, its flame no smaller than a dying heartbeat. The room was as we left it, except for one thing. A mirror stood where the fireplace used to be, tall, cracked, the glass blackened around the edges. I saw our reflections, but behind us something else moved, a shadow taller than the doorframe. Elizabeth whispered his name, though she shouldn't have. The air froze, her breath hanging between us. The light dimmed, and the whisper came again, louder this time, coming from the mirror. You left me in the dark. The shadow stepped forward, the glass rippling like water, a figure emerging, slow, deliberate, thin as smoke, his face pale, the eyes hollow but burning faint blue. He moved without sound, his feet not touching the floor. Elizabeth stumbled back, swinging the poker, but the metal passed through him like mist. He reached out, his hand hovering inches from her chest. The air around his fingers shimmered with light, the same glow that had lived inside Grace. I grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the door, but the floor cracked beneath us, the wood splitting open, a gash of black running across the room from wall to wall. Through it came a sound like hundreds of voices whispering in unison, not words, but the memory of words, each one calling our names. Elizabeth fell. I caught her wrist, but the pull was strong, like something beneath the floor wanted her, wanted us both. Her eyes met mine, wide, terrified. If I go, he'll stop. I shook my head. No one goes. But she smiled faintly, her tears freezing against her cheeks. You don't understand. He never wanted me, he wanted you. Before I could pull her up, the floor gave way, the darkness swallowed her whole, the whispering grew louder, the mirror cracked, and every piece of glass caught her face falling again and again into the black. I screamed her name, but it came out silent, the air too heavy to carry sound. The lantern burst, sending sparks through the dark. The shadow turned toward me, his face shifting through shapes, first Grace, then Elizabeth, then mine. "You can't bury what was never dead," the voice said, not from him, but from everywhere, from the walls, the ceiling, the air inside my chest. The light flared one last time, and the house began to shake, the roof splintering, the walls bending inward. I ran through the doorway into the cold morning light, the house collapsing behind me. With a roar of wood and flame, I fell into the snow, gasping as smoke rose through the trees, the sound fading into silence. For a long time I didn't move, I just watched the ashes drift across the snow, each one glowing faintly like dying embers. The forest stood still, listening, waiting. Then I heard it again, that soft humming pulse somewhere beneath the earth, slow, steady, alive. I turned toward the woods, and there in the distance I saw a figure standing in the mist, bare feet, pale face, eyes glowing faint blue. Grace, her head tilted slightly, her lips moving as she whispered something I could almost hear. "Come back." And then she was gone, swallowed by the fog, the forest silent once more. I stood alone, the ashes cooling around me, the path ahead leading nowhere, the whisper still in my head, "Now, gentle, almost kind, you can't leave Hollow Creek." The wind rose, carrying the last of the smoke through the trees, and in the distance beyond the fog, the faint light of the old house flickered again, alive once more. The fire had died, but the smoke still lingered, curling through the air like a memory that refused to fade. The forest was quiet, too quiet. Even the wind had stopped moving. Every sound felt swallowed by the earth itself. I stood in the clearing, watching the spot where the house once stood. Only black ash remained, but beneath the ground something shifted, a faint tremor like breath. My boots sank into the soft snow, and I felt the faint vibration through the soles, steady, rhythmic, the same pulse I had felt under the pond, the same light that once burned in Grace, the same voice that whispered inside the mirror. Hollow Creek was not just a place, it was alive. I began to walk again, no plan, no thought, just the need to move. The fog thickened, wrapping around the trees and cutting off the world, until it felt like I was walking through someone's lungs, each step deeper into something living. The air grew damp, heavy with rot, the scent of moss and wet earth, the ground soft beneath my feet. Then I saw it, a narrow path leading downhill, roots tangled like veins across it, twisting around old stones carved with marks I didn't recognize. The deeper I went, the colder it became. The trees bent inward, their branches forming a ceiling that blocked out what little light was left, until the world turned black and gray. At the bottom of the slope, I found a door half buried in the dirt, an old cellar door, wooden iron hinges eaten by rust, but it was warm to the touch, a faint red glow bleeding through the cracks. I pulled it open, and the heat rose out thick, choking, the sound of whispering beneath it, low, constant, endless. I stepped inside. The tunnel was narrow, and low, the walls covered in roots that pulsed faintly like veins. Every few steps I saw handprints in the dirt, small, large, some fresh, some so old they had become part of the wall. The deeper I went, the louder the whisper became, not words anymore, just sound, layers of sound, crying, praying, begging. Then the tunnel opened into a chamber wide, and round the ceiling, lost in darkness, the floor a pool of black water, so still it looked solid, and in the middle of it stood a figure, its back turned to me. Grace. Her skin glowed, faintly, the light bleeding through her hair, and along her fingers. She turned slowly, her eyes empty, but aware, her voice soft, almost a sigh, "You shouldn't have come back." I took a step forward, the water rippled, though I hadn't touched it. Grace's reflection moved before she did, her mouth opening, first the voice coming from below her, not above, "We can't leave until he does." The water around her began to glow red, and from its surface something rose, a shape, long, thin bones bound by shadow, the hollow man, his face formless, shifting between all of us. Grace, Elizabeth, me, his voice nothing but wind scraping against stone. "You opened the door." Grace's hands trembled, light spilling from her palms. She looked at me, eyes wide. I tried to hold him, I tried to keep him there. He stepped closer, his feet not touching the water, his shape flickering, each movement slow, precise, like something learning how to walk. His voice filled the air. She carried me out. Grace screamed, the light inside her flaring bright enough to blind the chamber, shook, the roots tore from the walls, the ceiling began to crack, and through it came a sound like the forest breathing in pain. I ran toward her, but the water surged upward, grabbing my legs, pulling me down, cold and thick and heavy. I fought, but it dragged harder, the whispers now inside my head, every word my own voice echoing back, "You brought this, you brought me." Grace reached out her hand, her face breaking apart between light and shadow. She whispered, "Run," but I couldn't move. The water climbed to my chest, my neck, my mouth. Every breath burned until I stopped fighting and let it take me. The world went dark. When I opened my eyes, I was standing in the forest again, but the sky was red, the trees black, the snow gone, replaced by ash, the clearing empty, no house, no path, no sound, just stillness. I turned around and saw the pond from before, frozen again, its surface smooth, unbroken, but beneath the ice something moved, a shape drifting, slowly rising. I stepped closer and saw my own face staring back, pale eyes open, unmoving, the same faint light glowing under the skin. A voice whispered behind me, soft, almost kind, "It's your turn now." I turned, but no one was there, only the wind moving through the trees, the sound of roots shifting beneath the ground like breath waiting to begin again. I looked back at the ice, my reflection smiling faintly before vanishing completely, the surface cracking just once, then still. Somewhere deep below Hollow Creek something sighed, content, the whisper fading back into the soil where it had always been waiting. The sky above Hollow Creek no longer looked like sky. It was a dull silver dome rippling with faint light, as if the world had been turned inside out. The air was colder now, every breath scraping my throat. I stood where the pond once was, but the water had vanished, leaving only cracked mud and black stones. The faint hum beneath the ground was gone, replaced by something worse, silence. I began to walk through the forest again, though I wasn't sure in which direction. The trees had changed. They leaned inward, their bark pale smooth like bone, their branches twisting above to form a tunnel of sorts, leading into a distance that shimmered faintly. The path beneath my feet glowed dull red, as if lit from below with dying embers. I walked for what felt like hours, maybe days, the light never changing, the world stuck in a single moment of gray time. I tried to call out for Elizabeth, for Grace, for anyone, but my voice never came back. It was swallowed before it left my lips. Then the path opened, and I saw a road, black, wet, stretching endlessly ahead, 2 yellow lines cutting through the mist. I didn't recognize it, but something in me knew it well, the way you know a dream you've had too many times. The sign beside it was half broken, but one word remained hollow, the rest burned away. I started walking the road, humming faintly under my steps, the sound pulsing with my heartbeat. The trees fell away on either side, replaced by fields of white grass, swaying in rhythm with the hum, each blade moving like breath. I looked up and saw shapes in the fog, standing still, hundreds of them lined along the road, unmoving, their outlines human, their faces blank, their skin as pale as wax. As I passed them, I realized they weren't breathing, they weren't even real. They were like echoes, frozen in the moment before fear becomes sound. Each one had a faint light inside their chest, dim, flickering in time with the road itself. One of them turned its head slowly, eyes opening, 2 hollow black holes. It whispered my name, not loud, but perfectly clear. I kept walking, pretending I hadn't heard, but then the others began to whisper too, a low chorus of broken voices, all saying the same thing, "Come home." I ran the road, stretched, pulling longer beneath me, the sound rising like wind, a vibration deep enough to shake my bones. The shapes began to move their heads, turning their mouths, opening without sound, the hum of the road becoming words. "You can't leave Hollow Creek." The fog thickened until the road vanished. I stopped breathing for a moment, afraid to move, afraid the world would collapse if I did. Then a light appeared ahead, faint at first, then brighter, a car, headlights flickering through the mist, an engine low and uneven like something alive. I stepped into the center of the road, waving, desperate. The light grew closer until it blinded me, and then it stopped. The car was old, rusted black paint peeling, its engine still running, but no one sat inside. The door hung open, keys still in the ignition. The radio buzzed faintly with static between the noise. A voice whispered soft like a prayer, "You shouldn't have left her." I climbed inside, the seat cold, damp, the steering wheel slick with moisture. I turned the key, the engine growled, alive, the headlights cutting through the fog, showing nothing but the endless road. I pressed the pedal, the car moved slow, then faster, the hum rising in pitch, the light on the dashboard flickering between red and blue, the speedometer needle spinning, though I felt nothing, no wind, no motion, just the same view stretching on forever. Then the radio changed, the static breaking, the voice clear now, a woman's voice, "Grace, you can't drive away from a place that doesn't exist." I froze, the wheel trembling under my hands. I looked in the mirror and saw her sitting in the back seat, her eyes hollow, her skin cracked with light, her lips trembling with something between a smile and pain. The car began to shake the road ahead, splitting open lines of light, tearing through the asphalt, the hum now a scream, metal grinding, bone breaking. I tried to brake, but the pedal sank useless to the floor. The headlights caught the shape of a figure standing in the middle of the road, tall, thin, its face hidden in shadow, the hollow man waiting. Grace's voice rose louder, "Stop, but the car didn't stop. The light hit him, and everything went white. When the light faded, I was no longer in the car. I was standing on the same forest path. Again, the same fog, the same hum beneath my feet, the road gone, as if it never existed. The only sound a faint whisper coming from behind me. I turned slowly and saw the house on Hollow Creek, standing again, whole untouched, lantern burning in the window. The door opened by itself, a warm light spilling out, and through the glow I saw two figures, Grace and Elizabeth, standing side by side, both watching me, both smiling, their mouths moving together, whispering the same words over and over. You made it home. The ground beneath me cracked, the hum returning stronger until it filled the air with sound, everything shaking, trees bending, light blurring my vision. Grace reached out her hand, her voice clear, now softer than before. Stay. I took one step forward, then another, the light wrapping around me, the hum turning into silence until there was nothing but warmth, darkness, and the faint smell of smoke. And when I opened my eyes, I was back inside the house, the fire burning steady, the mirror fixed, the walls clean, the floor unbroken, the air calm. Outside, the snow fell slow and quiet, covering Hollow Creek once more.